I think it's a message. I think he's talking to the Republican Party. President of the United States to stick me in the gut with a knife. Cross me if you're a Republican, and I will make your life hell. Well, George Santos gets out of prison. And, you know, I told you, I mentioned this in the previous hour, that in my opinion, this is Donald Trump messaging. I don't think this had much to do with Santos. Although it's possible. I mean, it's possible that Santos knew somebody who could give $1 million to Donald Trump, which seems to be his price to get a pardon, or, you know, other favors, his minimum price. And you see this with, you know, businessmen and women and companies. You know, you give money to Donald Trump privately. You know, the United Arab Emirates, they gave $2 billion to his sons, to Don and Eric, and Steve Witkoff's sons, for their new, you know, what do you call it, crypto business. $2 billion. And in exchange for that, Trump gives them hundreds of thousands of these top security NVIDIA AI chips that are never supposed to leave the country. And the UAE has a mutual defense treaty with China. And the whole point of the thing around these chips is to not give them to China. Yeah, I mean, Trump is just breaking bribery laws left and right. But I haven't seen any evidence that Santos bribed him, like many others have, actually, apparently. And Rudy Giuliani, of course, bragged about this back in the day, you know, back in 2020, that he and Trump were charging $2 million for a pardon, and they'd split it 50-50. Rudy got $1 million and Trump got $1 million. And that got, you know, again, you know, Merrick Garland never followed up on that one either. But anyhow, if Santos didn't actually bribe Trump, then why did Trump pardon him? I think, as I mentioned earlier, just very briefly, I want to expand on this a little. I think it's a message. I think he's talking to the Republican Party. I think he, you know, as I mentioned in my opening rant, virtually without exception, the successful dictators who came to power through an election and then ended their country's democracy did it based, you know, on a platform of overwhelming popularity. And Donald Trump doesn't have that platform. Now, the way that Mussolini ended democracy in Italy, I think, was interesting and perhaps instructive. What he did was he packed the court. You know, their Supreme Court and their federal courts, I mean, their court system is slightly different than ours and has different names, but, you know, the effect was the same. He packed the court first. And then, you know, he just started doing things that were patently illegal, and the court just kept backing him up. And we are seeing, you know, a similar thing going on right now. But I don't think it's going to last. I really don't. Because he is so unpopular and there's so much pushback. And you're starting to hear Republicans pushing back. And, you know, dear God, you know, let us take control of the House of Representatives, right? I mean, it's like, if that happens, and, you know, I mean, it's probably going to be 14 months before we know, but it might be as little as 2. But if we get back, if Democrats get control of the House of Representatives, that's it for Trump. They will take him down, and that's why he's got all these states gerrymander. You know, North Carolina just did it. And what's amazing, you know, it just passed the North Carolina House, this new redistricting map, which is going to give North Carolina. I'm sorry, I don't have the exact numbers right in front of me, but it's something like, well, more or less on the order of 2/3 or maybe even 4/5 of the people that they send to Congress are Republicans, even though the state is a 50-50 state. This is a state with a Democratic governor. In a statewide race, a Democrat was elected governor in North Carolina. So what did the Republicans do when the Democrat was elected governor? They passed a law saying that that the governor can no longer, for the first time in the history of North Carolina, can no longer veto legislation. They gutted the power of the governor because it was a Democrat. These guys play for keeps. So this morning, yesterday, it passed the House, the North Carolina House, this redistricting, And it's going to the Senate today, and it'll probably pass the Senate today. And that makes it law because the governor has no veto. So that's another state. They're just ticking them off one after another. And they think that, when they're all done, they're going to have a permanent 20 to 24 person Republican majority in the House of Representatives. Well, that assumes that the voting patterns in 2026 are the same as they were in 2024. And I think that's a very dangerous assumption. And I think that's why Donald Trump pardoned George Santos, to bring it back to the topic of this rant. I think that George Santos, I don't think Trump gives a rat's, I don't think he cares. He doesn't give a rat's patootie about George Santos. George Santos never did anything for him. He's not going to, they're not buds. George Santos is weird. He's a professional liar. He's a BS artist. Pathologically, he's mentally ill. And Trump knows that. But Trump wanted to send a message, and I think I believe it was Marjorie Taylor Greene who started this. I think Marjorie Taylor Greene defined Donald Trump on the Jeffrey Epstein stuff. And then yesterday or the day before, she came out and made this statement that, if Trump keeps trashing our economy through things like tariffs and, refusing to fund the Affordable Care Act with those subsidies that'll keep insurance rates low. And she came right out and pointed out that her own son's insurance is going to double as a result of the big, beautiful bill, right? She said this. And so I think Trump needed a vehicle for a message to the Republican Party. And that vehicle is this pardon, it's actually a commutation. He didn't give him a complete pardon, but he gave him a commutation. And not only does he get out of jail, but there's a $375,000 in restitution that Santos had to pay to his victims. Keep in mind, he went to jail for financial fraud, not for all the lies he told to get elected. He went to jail for financial fraud, for stealing from people. And then he also had $205,000 that he was supposed to forfeit, that he was supposed to give, that he was supposed to, pay to the state to cover his crimes. So that's over $500,000. And now he doesn't have to pay that back. So he's got some money. Maybe he's given that money to Donald. I don't know. But you ever heard of Richard Osthoff? Richard Osthoff, O-S-T-H-O-F-F, is this veteran. He was a homeless veteran who had this dog. It was an old service dog. And his dog was sick. His dog's name was Sapphire. And the media did a story about this. Some reporter someplace, met Richard Osthoff on the street, sleeping in his cardboard box or his tent or whatever with his dog, and they did a nice little story about it. And so George Santos goes out and sets up this GoFundMe page to pay for the veterinarian for this veteran's dog. And he raised $3,000 on GoFundMe. And then Santos kept the money himself, or at least that's the allegation. So Osthoff now comes out and says, that now that Santos has been pardoned, Osthoff says, I was just really sick to my stomach for the President of the United States to stick me in the gut with a knife. He should have done, Santos, should have done at least half of his 7 years. This is disgusting. It's shameful and a disgrace, and I'm almost ashamed that I serve my country now. This is not the country I raised my hand to serve. That man disrespects the military and veterans and just about everybody that doesn't wear a red hat every single day. He is a walking middle finger. Well, once again, my point is, I think that he got George Santos out by way of saying to Republicans, this is a message for elected Republicans, stay with me, and no matter what kind of crime you commit, I'll get you out. But cross me, like James Comey did, lifelong Republican. Cross me if you're a Republican, and I will make your life hell. That's the message that Donald Trump delivered with the Santos commutation.